Hello and welcome to episode 108 of the First and Goal podcast. I am Ben Roberts, joined by Sim Lunga, and we are joined by our friend Jack. You can follow him on Twitter at JT Boiler. Lots of good stuff there. Jack, thank you for joining us this evening and talking a little gridiron here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Always fun to talk some Purdue football. We got to do it in the spring. Interesting to see how things have changed. Our views and what's going on here in fall camp. It'll be a good conversation we got going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so we figured it'd be a good time here, about halfway through fall camp, almost officially 2 weeks until opening night at Ross 8, which is just crazy to think about how close we are there. And just kind of as we talk big picture, I think, for me, the biggest thing is just the vibe this year feels a little different. And I know, probably every team has that because it's fall camp. Everybody, is in the best shape of their life. Everybody's all excited. Everybody's undefeated. But it just feels different. It feels like a much kind of different feeling than where we were at 1 year ago.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a big part of that, just listening to the post practice interviews and stuff, is Barry Odom is just carrying himself a little more confidently. You know, um, After the first year, they actually didn't spend right all of their rev share money. They saved some for this second offseason to kind of be able to really go hard in the transfer portal. And I think just because of that, he feels a lot more confident in the roster he has from top to bottom. I don't think they necessarily went out and got like stars, but I think there's just a lot more depth, and I think that gives him a lot more confidence. And just like you think about it, practice is higher quality, the players a little bit higher quality, right? I think the whole air around everything is going a little better for sure.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that's the biggest thing that I've read um, so far is just talking at like the coaches talking about the depth and like the kind of that continuity, like with the removal of the spring window as well. They were a lot more. It seemed like Purdue was a lot more calculated and meticulous in when in their pursuits in the portal, like you said. Jack, like it wasn't like they were trying to go out and swing big for these big names. It was just kind of guys who they knew who could contribute, guys who knew that they could play winning football, and guys who they felt like were coachable. And so you're seeing in various positions. And I think Odom even said he was like, we've got several positions where there's still battles for who's going to start, and that's not a bad thing when you have when you feel like you have multiple guys who are capable of playing, who are capable of starting and being productive. So I think that's the biggest thing is that you're not in the kind of scramble drill that you were last year, where you were just trying to fill the roster and just kind of like, hey, any and everyone pull up, you know what I'm saying, and come and take a jersey. You get a jersey, you get a jersey type deal. This year, it's like no, like they was more thought out, and so it definitely seems like they're more confident about the roster that they've assembled and what they're able to build, like having more time.
I mean, and you think about it, like last year, Ryan Brown came in for fall camp. Same thing with like Nitro Tuggle and a lot of the like most important players on Purdue's offense and on the defensive side. I mean, Charles Correa even came in the summer. Like a lot of their best players or a lot of their most important players all came in and didn't have spring practice. We're running on a pretty short amount of time to learn the system and jump into things. Here they've got more continuity, and the guys they're new had more time to break in. So I think all of that lends to the coaching staff feeling better about the upcoming season.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're Jack. We're right now. Our words are getting Ben really really hyped. Yeah, he's about to make a prediction. That's gonna really set the streets ablaze.
I'll save that until the end. But speaking of like depth, I think to me one of the most intriguing, one of the most interesting probably positions on the roster is running back. That's probably the one I'm most excited to kind of see here in a couple of weeks. You got depth and you got like experience depth. You got Fame from Minnesota. You got Jared Gibson. You also have Antonio Harris, who really came on late in the year last year. And then you got kind of like the gadget speed guy, Harold. That spot to me seems kind of like an area that could be a real strength, and really one that Purdue really hasn't had like this kind of depth at the running back spot in a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go no, go ahead.
Oh, you can go. You're good.
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, depth, especially at your skill positions, is imperative in terms of what you're able to do offensively. And because sometimes, if you have guys who are just kind of one trick ponies, you as a defense, you're kind of you to some extent can be tipping your hand depending on who's in. And seemingly like, I know you're mentioning guys who they might be good at one particular thing, but like, they have the like excuse me, they're just when you have guys who are good at multiple facets, it just now it allows you, I think, as a play caller to be more confident in what you're going to call and know that no, we can run the same thing regardless of who's in the game. And I think that also I think it helps Ryan Brown out too. I think
Oh, yeah.
like running backs, then even go one step further with the wide receivers when you have more resources there. It's just not you're not having to put so much on him to do it a certain kind of way. Like he can be creative. You know that you have confidence in whoever it is that you're handing the ball off to. That guys are going to block. To be able to do like everything that you're asking for them to do. Can find matchups. Like I saw a highlight today of Terrell. Like I think he was out on like a fly route or something like that. When got it. And I'm seeing that now. Of like, get him on a linebacker and let's make some magic happen. And like you said, Ben, I don't know if we've necessarily had that type of skill set in the backfield collectively in a while.
I mean, I think you think back to Purdue's like most recent successful running backs. It's not to hate on those guys. I love them both, but like Devin Mockbee and Xander Horvath are the two of the last like real running backs that stayed in the position and were kind of the lead guys for Purdue. And both were walk-ons, and that's not a knock on them because they both end up being great players. Like Xander Horvath is still playing the CFL and killing it there, and Devin Mockbee, nearly got to the top of Purdue's all-time rushing list, but it weren't like they were like overwhelmingly gifted with athletic traits. And here, that's where I think the backfield just looks different. Like Fama Ejeboy and Jared Gibson are both kind of bigger, in that like 210, 215 kind of range. But they both have an athletic profile that I don't think we've really had at Purdue in a while, be able to do a lot of the things. And then you still have some guys with speed like Antonio Harris, who, I mean, I know he didn't play a ton, but he had over 300 yards in the Big Ten last season. Like that's not nothing. And then you also have, like you were talking about, Travis Terrell, who's going to be everywhere on the field. I've seen him, like I went to the fan day and, I'm looking for him working with the running backs, and he's over there working with the wide receivers, playing the slot or doing whatever, right? And he's like, they're going to put him all over the field. He's got great speed. I mean, I think he's like, once again, going back to a former Purdue player, like Akeem Hunt levels of, like speed and shiftiness. I don't think, once again, we've had a whole lot at the running back spot since then.
Right. No, it's a good point too about the walk on piece. Like it's not an indictment on those guys, but it does kind of speak to the rest of the room in terms of like what the quality was there. So yeah, that's a pleasant seemingly pleasant good upgrade there at the running back position.
Well, and the other thing with the depth too is that you can keep those guys fresh, all game long and all year long. Whereas, in past years, I feel like, guys have kind of worn down some. And, whether that's in a game or whether that's in November, after a grueling year. But with this kind of depth, man, game by game and throughout the year too, like you can just channel these guys in and out. And I think that's something too that Purdue can really use as a strength.
Yeah. 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 Because you mentioned the piece about what is it, Antonio Harris? And like I think I've seen some places where they have him like projected as like the third running back, and that's a guy who has minutes, like you said, like he has reps, like his 300 yards last year. Like that's nothing to slouch at. And that's a guy who could be possibly your running back three, and I imagine you have pretty good confidence in him and what he's able to do. So again, yeah, just some seemingly really good depth at the running back position, which allows us to which can just set up for great things this year.
Yeah, and so you kind of talked how it'll help out the quarterback there. Let's talk about him just a little bit too, because I think him, and I want to kind of channel the discussion along with the wide receivers too, because I think obviously Ryan wears a lot of the blame because he's the quarterback one. He's kind of the face of everything, but that wide receiver group last year kind of a lot to be desired. You know, you think of drops and just, you know, miscommunications and, you know, part of that was just getting guys in late and, you know, just trying to get everybody on the same page. You know, this kind of speaks to having that whole off season, having this whole fall camp with all of these guys. I feel like just kind of improving that wide receiver room, how they did, is just going to make, you know, things so much easier for Ryan. And, you know, he does have to take the next step and, you know, play smarter and kind of limit some of those turnovers. But just kind of hand in hand, how this wide receiver room is going to help Ryan Brown, how the running backs are going to help this one. You know, this offense as a whole, as we kind of talk about it too, just seems to kind of be so much more deeper than what we were a year ago.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like the whole ecosystem has improved, right? It's like that little butterfly effect where, you know, when you have a running back who makes a play, who makes the, you know, offensive line look better, it helps. Or when you have a wide receiver who gets wide open, it makes the quarterback look better, right? Or, you know, there's a million examples of it. And when everybody's playing a little better, everybody gets a little better. And I think there's a big case of that. Especially with the wide receivers, and I'm gonna do something I don't like to do, and that is kind of speak negatively on guys who are still in the roster. But you know, last year, the two guys that really played at wide receiver that are still on the roster are, I mean, oh gosh, Corey Smith and Jesse Watson, and both pretty good speed, but both struggled with drops last year. And I'll be real with you, just from all the reports and stuff, they're not really even running with the ones or anywhere close to it because they have so many new guys or so many people coming back from injury that are playing with it. And so, I mean, there's just something where like some of your guys that were, you know, in games last year are now towards the bottom of the depth chart, right? And that in itself kind of shows an improvement. I also think you've seen Ryan Brown over the course of the offseason is working with Jeff Christensen, who was like Patrick Mahomes QB trainer and all this stuff in Texas. And he actually at one point took a bunch of the wide receivers. I don't think it was all of them, but a good handful. And he flew them to Texas to train with him there. And he goes every weekend and he takes a couple at a time. And they had one time where he took everybody. And so I think there's just more time for them to work together to get on the same page. And like we're saying, kind of improve that whole ecosystem of the offense and just be more of a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, no, I think that was actually a good call out regarding the guys you have returning who you counted on last year now being further down in the depth chart. And it's not necessarily saying that they haven't gotten better. I think it just speaks again to the quality that you have in that room. I think but I think time is the biggest thing that I think that will show itself, that'll materialize. The fact that like you've had this entire offseason, because it was a good point about how like Brian Brown, he left and then he came back. And it wasn't like he came back to the same system. He came back to a different system. So like again, even last year he was kind of behind the eight ball. You don't have that time to build that continuity with guys. And it seems as though that was very much so a focus of his, and the fact that guys were so receptive to that and wanting to put in that time because they understand that, hey, with time, when we're able to be on the same page. I mean, you hear about it all the time when with great quarterback wide receiver connections about how they don't have to say anything, how they can just kind of look at each other and just kind of know what they're going to do. And being that happens over time. And I'm not saying that you get to that point necessarily in an off season, but you trend in that direction and you feel more confident about, hey, look, especially when we have to go down and we have to make a drive or we have to make a play to extend a drive, you feel more confident about, hey, we're all going to be on the same page here in terms of what we see. And also, like, I guess Ryan Brown's expectation of how guys are going to run routes, and conversely, how guys expect the ball to come out from Ryan Brown. Like, it just, when that continuity and that relationship is strengthened, then yeah, like you said, it's that kind of ecosystem effect of like just everyone kind of benefiting from being on the same page and just having just overall more time with each other.
I couldn't agree more. The other kind of skill area that, you know, sticking on the offensive side where it feels like Purdue could really use some improvement, it was at the tight end spot. It seemed like kind of a spot that was super underutilized last year. And you know, they did, you know, for the most part in fall camp, we've been able to kind of come away pretty healthy. But the Kylan Fox injury there hurts. You do have Big George back, who should have kind of a breakout year, hopefully. But that kind of seems like probably on the offensive side, the biggest area of concern. Maybe it's just kind of, especially with the injury there now, like who's kind of going to step up and emerge there.
Okay, so
Got
I would say
it. You got
it's
it.
tough because really like Purdue has talent, right, at tight end, but they don't really have anybody that has consistently played for a full season, even just like as a blocker and as like catching, simple passes. And Kylan Fox was kind of that guy who actually had played before starting out of high school, played a good bit for UCF, and he wasn't like super active in the pass game, but he was an active blocker. And in the spring, when I went to the spring showcase, George was out, and Kylan was the guy that consistently Ryan Brown was looking to over the middle for like checkdowns. It felt like, and so him being out, I think, really hurts because one, I think they were going to play George and him on the field at the same time pretty significantly because George can also line up almost as a wide receiver with his speed and stuff. And so I think you're losing something there. And behind him, you have basically just a bunch of freshmen. You have Amari Towns, who was a pretty decently touted three-star tight end, who's kind of more in the mold of Burn, where he's kind of on the smaller, faster side, tall, skinnier kind of tight end. And then you have Cooper McCutcheon, who's a freshman, who also is kind of more on the Kylan Fox side, where he's a little bit more of a blocker and stuff. But still, he's you're coming in as a freshman, expecting to block Big Ten linebackers and defensive ends and stuff, right? And then the other piece that's Luca Puccinelli, who was here last year, transferred in and kind of sad. He really only played against IU and had a catch or two in that game and looked all right. But he's kind of a big dude. He's like 260 pounds, so he's almost like a little bit more on that blocking side. And so, but the main thing is after George, you have no experience that position basically now.
Right.
And I think last year that's a time where like when George went down, it was the same thing where we had nobody who was just like even really quite ready to be a decent tight end and step in. And I think that hurt what the offense could do in a lot of ways, both running and pass game.
Right. Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say. Like Ben mentioned that it was like a tight end was an underutilized position last year. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, yeah, it's because you didn't really have the depth. Yeah, when George went down, it made it, it compounded on that. And yeah, that's why that Kylan Fox injury is so significant because I think you genuinely felt like you had two guys who, like you said, Jack, like you could play them at the same time, but also two guys who individually you could have in there in the game. And again, that's somebody who the defense has to pay attention to. And again, like, with an injury like that, going to some coach speak, but like, it's an opportunity for some of these younger guys to be able to step up and prove themselves. But also I think for us as fans, we kind of have to look at it and kind of temper the expectations of like what you think you're going to get out of that tight end position. Cause yeah, George can be a stud, but like at some point, I don't think he's going to play every play. He's going to have to come out and it's in those plays you just kind of need. It's almost like you just need whoever comes in to be able to kind of hold water and just make sure you don't stick out in a bad way. So yeah, very really unfortunate for from a tight end standpoint, but I don't know. You got to believe in the coaching staff that they'll be able to figure out some ways to kind of mitigate the impact of that loss.
You've been practicing your coach speak there, huh? You're
I've
in
been, look, man,
mid-year form already. It's only
look,
August, man.
it ain't fall camp just for the players. You know what I'm saying? I got to be out here myself.
Like, fall camp is when you hear the most coach speak. Let's be honest here. So
Oh, it really is.
That's
kind of
true
makes
too.
sense.
You hear all the quotables, all the quotables. I like where we're at right now. We got some guys who are, they're really showing us something, but they got to keep working. Nothing's given, everything's earned.
We're working really hard. We're working really hard. I can't tell you. I don't know who's going to play there, but they're all working their butts off. That's all I know.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the defensive side, because that's really probably the area that could use the most improvement. Really in all three kind of phases, and kind of how we talked about on the offensive side with the ecosystem. It worked like that on the defensive side of the ball too, because for a lot of the time last year, couldn't really guard the wide receivers very well, couldn't really give pressure on the quarterback very well. struggled sometimes to tackle, and then you couldn't really do all three in some games too. But for me, like looking at defense, the biggest thing that has to improve is you got to generate turnovers. That you got to find ways to flip the field, and just to kind of get some momentum on your side. Was it was like half the year I think before we even got one last year. Like
Yeah,
it took
yeah,
forever.
it was a
It was
while.
unreal.
Yeah,
And then you were like, all right, well, maybe that means that we're just gonna start getting them in bunches, and it didn't happen. So that to me on the defensive side, like that's got to be number one is how can we generate more turnovers, and really just negative plays too. There just wasn't a lot of, sacks, tackles for a loss. I think those kind of go hand in hand. Like how can we generate negative plays and, flip the field there?
yeah. No, I think you have to. I think you have to have a defense that in itself kind of forces the issue. I'm glad you pointed out the turnover piece because to me it was the most damning statistic is the fact you couldn't because like you were just it feels like you should at least be able to trip into like a sack strip fumble or like or a batted ball that ends up a deflected ball that ends up turning it into a pick and it was like game in and game out we're just finding a way to not turn the ball over and conversely, if you're turning the ball over, if you're trying to come back in games, if you're trying to, you're trying to extend leads, yeah, you can get, getting just like, forcing a team to punt is good, it's fine. But like, especially if you're trying to come back, you need to be able to generate turnovers. You need to be able to have negative plays. And like you said, at all three levels, you just didn't get that type of like you didn't really have one group you could say, well, these guys are game changers. These guys are the ones who we can look to kind of change the momentum. And again, like it seems as though what they've done in the portal, especially I think like in the really in the front the on the D line and especially on corner. Because corner, I felt like we were just getting cooked last year. I remember like the Rutgers game where I think what was it? Their best wide receiver was out, and then their wide receiver two absolutely ate. And I just remember thinking, outside of like it's the most Purdue thing that could happen. Also, it was like that's unacceptable. So yeah, you really hope. I mean, I don't know how much I'll celebrate. I might lose my voice in the first game if they force a turnover. Just to know that like, hey, we're not going to do that like last year. But yeah, I mean, absolutely with that defense, it sounds again as though again there's that good issue of having depth across multiple positions on the defense, which is good because again, I think you need depth on defense, and also believing that you have guys who are capable of starting means that you think you have guys who are also capable of being game changers. So, yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting because this is the one spot where like I 100% agree with you that depth is great, but sometimes with coach speak, I get worried when like they talk about, oh yeah, we have a lot of guys in that room. Oh yeah, we could play like Odom said. I think right now and they're asking like who are gonna be the starting defensive ends. He's like, oh yeah, there are like 6 to 8 guys that are competing for that spot.
Yeah, so
And and
that kind of
and
weird.
part of me is like, okay, so you're telling me there's 6 to 8 guys, and there's not two, there's not like three that have separated themselves,
Right,
like you're just
right.
saying, which it could just be coach speak, like he could totally have one or two of them picked out already, but that's one of those positions where I think they can be a lot better because you have all the options, right? They've brought in three defensive ends from the portal that have played a little bit and should have the potential to help with Elo Madozi from Georgia, who was a first conference player at Army before that when they were really good. They brought in Keyshawn Burgos from Virginia Tech, who is like a huge dude and has played decent football for Virginia Tech sometimes. They also brought in Jeremy Lewis Jr. From the JUCO ranks, who was a national champion in the JUCO ranks, had an amazing statistical season. And so all those guys think, well, they should be able to compete. But then you also have your three edge rushers who really played the most outside of CJ Nunley last year coming back with CJ Madden, who, started the majority of the games there. Trey Smith started a lot of games too early on this season. And then you also had Breon Ishmael, who played a lot at the end of the season. And so you have three guys that have been in the program that can develop. You also have three brand new options. And that's good as long as somebody can, actually win out, right? I like the potential for improvement. But that's one where like I'm a little afraid until game 1 or 2 to really know where we're at.
Yeah, 6 to 8 guys on the front line. You're kind of like, don't y'all have 8 guys total? So like, you're saying everyone? So you're right. It feels like it's one of those that can go either way because it could be a situation of like, yeah, like we have guys like who are like we're really this deep and like yeah, we can throw anybody in there and it's good. Or it could be like 6 to 8 guys who are kind of like mediocre and it's like
Yeah.
I'm gonna tap into Ben's hopium here and say nah, it's more positive.
Mhm.
But yeah, that is one of those where, like you said, you do want to see a bit of separation, just to know because of what you saw last year. It would be nice to have a few guys who you just know, no, these guys they're starting.
Yeah. But I also think it's not Coach Odom's way to like give that stuff away when it's not actually there yet. Like last year, reports are out that they knew that Brown was a starting quarterback for like 2 or 3 weeks before they said it publicly, so there's a good chance too. It could be some of that fall camp coach speak we're talking about.
Fine by me.
And with that spot specifically too, it kind of feels like a prime opportunity for a guy like CJ Madden to kind of really break out. He seems like a guy, man, you just like wait, like he looks the part. He's got all of the athletic ability in the world, and you just wait for him to have like one of these big breakout games. And I'm glad you mentioned kind of the guys returning because, obviously not only got a lot of kind of the notoriety, but those guys, especially late, they really kind of started to play well. And so, that does seem kind of like an area where, it's an area of opportunity for sure.
Yeah, but no, I just think too like if they just like I mean it's easy to say like they just have to be better than you were last year. But I think too that even just like from a line standpoint, like it doesn't necessarily have to be as black and white of like, oh, you get sacks or you don't. I just think like being able to genuinely get pressure. I mean, like to where you can really get a quarterback's clock, sped up. That's where I mean that's still good too. That's still good too. I think if you're in that position, yeah, you'll probably end up you'll get home a few times. But it seemed like there were times like games last year where I mean they had hours to scan the field and decide I'm gonna throw it. Oh no, I'm gonna run it. Oh wait, I'm gonna run it. Nope, I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna throw it. And it's just like, yeah, you especially from that front four, you need to be able to get some impact if you really want to. And yeah, Ben, I think you're right with CJ Madden. Like it's a prime opportunity for him to be able to show out and show what he has. Not just for like obviously us winning games this year, but for any type of pro aspirations he has.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then like no,
on
go ahead,
the
Jim.
back end you're talking about too, right? Like they have Hidori Hines returning, who played a little bit as a freshman, started all last season as a sophomore, and he was kind of all right. He had some good games, had some bad games, but he's guy has the athletic traits. He's 6'2", he's pretty fast at corner. And then they brought in Donovan Saunders, so Don Saunders from Utah, who is the guy that honestly all the coaches and even like the opposing or the wide receivers for Purdue in interviews have talked about as like the dude at DB right now or at corner. He's 6'4", he runs like a 4.4 40, super long, athletic. He's had like when you check things out PFF wise, he's had good grades every stop he's been at. Whether it was FCS where he played a bunch, and then he was at Texas A&M in Utah where he only played a little bit, but had good grades when he did. And it's like it's kind of scary because I think last year we kind of heard a similar story about Tony Grimes at times. I felt like bigger, athletic corner, former 5-star kind of guy, who had all the traits and stuff, and they hyped him up a little bit, and then he kind of had an okay season, but he fell short of what I think our initial expectations were. And so interesting to see, through this portal cycle, if the other guy across from Hidori Hines this season is able to put together a good year.
Yeah.
Well, and just like the thing that stands out with that is just the size piece. Like I just feel like for so long we've just always had just tiny DBs, and it's just play after play. We've got wide receivers just high pointing all of our defensive backs, and so just to kind of get some size there to just we'll go a long way too. It's just nice to see us be like, oh, we can recruit a DB who's not the size of them, and can actually go get it. So
That's crazy work, yo. Wow, wow, wow. Be your own people do that shit. That's crazy work, yo. All right, man. That's what it is, yeah.
but man, we've been talking all about defense, and we haven't talked about the best player that's on the defensive side of the ball. One guy that I'm just super excited to see, man, like for year two, and Charles Correa, he just seemed like even last year when, things kind of were really dire on the defensive side, he was a dude that always just stood out. And just seems to find a way to always be around the ball. And just a guy that I think we're gonna really enjoy watching this year. I try to think back to kind of a linebacker, that we've had prior to him that has had kind of the ability, that he has. And, this I think is going to be a really fun year to watch him run around and hopefully make a lot of good plays for us.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on the piece of like when was the last time I had a linebacker like him? I feel like in my mind, just even from like a size perspective, because there's been a lot of stories this offseason about Charles Correa putting on a bunch of weight, like eating 1 million calories and like
Mhm.
really kind of bulking up while trying to maintain his speed. But he's like up around 250 now. Um, and the last linebacker we had that had that size, right, like 6'3", 6'2", 250 was Jawan Bentley, who went on to play for the Patriots for a long time and stuff. And I mean, I don't want to,
Good call.
say that he's that good already because I mean I think he has potential to be one of the best linebackers in a long time, but like that's a pretty high bar. But I mean he's big dude, thumper, able to kind of fly around and always is around the ball, like you're saying. I mean, last year as the first time he ever started, like he even started UNLV and at Purdue, he was a Big Ten all honorable mention. 96 tackles, 3 sacks, right? Like, I mean, for your first year playing at all and only being there for a couple of months still in the system, it's pretty impressive. So he's going to be the guy definitely to keep your eye on as like both a leader, sort of vocally and by his play.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think, yeah, again, he's another guy who we talk about like when he got to Purdue, and in terms of having that time, he goes through the entire season. And yeah, like you said, for that having that limited of time leading up to the season and to be all Big Ten honorable mention, in a conference that had a lot of guys who were good on defense who went to the NFL. That I think that's saying a lot about Charles Correa. And so you think about him getting an off season time to continue to work on his body, continue to understand the system, and just overall his maturity of just like understanding the game better. And it makes you excited about what you could see from him. And I think he was also talking about some of the other guys that he has in that linebacker room and how he's been excited about that, about the guys who are with him. And if you have other good guys to play alongside with him, it makes the job easier for him as well. So like kind of like we were talking about on offense with in terms of the skill players and that ecosystem effect for Ryan Brown, I think it could be the same thing for Charles Correa as well. So very much so excited to see how he's grown from year one to year two. And I think he can be a lot more. He can be that guy, that game changer, that impact player who keeps you up at night.
I will say with that too, just the one thing I remembered is there were some reports from camp, right? The QB coach Darren Hinshaw said that Ryan Brown is like thrown 14 touchdowns, only one interception. You know that one interception was to Charles Correa. So I mean, that whole point you're making, it definitely like all the signs point towards him being the guy for Purdue if you have one right now.
Good.
Well, one area where we don't really have a guy yet, and it's probably one area that I feel like is not being talked about enough. That's probably one of my biggest areas of concern, maybe, and that's at the kicker spot. Um, because you have a huge question mark there. It sounds like it's down between Seth Turner and then the true freshman Jacobo. And reading from what Odom said He said like he wants to kind of put them in some pressure spots and see how they react. But for the longest time, it felt like that was an area where we really struggled to find any kind of consistency. And then we had it, and you felt the past couple of years you felt pretty good there. But now it's just for me probably one of the biggest question marks going into week one.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the people laugh about kickers, but I think it's what it's a guy on Twitter, Andrew Brandt. Like, I used to be the GM of the Packers, and he talks about kickers are like lawyers. No one needs one. You don't hope to, excuse me, everyone like you don't hope to use a lawyer, but when you do need a lawyer, you want a good one. It's the same thing with kickers. It's like you don't really want to have your kicker out there all the time, obviously just for like extra points ideally. But when you do need your kicker, you do need him to hit a key field goal or to make sure to cash in on a drive. You want to make sure you have a good one. So yeah, that was, I know that was some unexpected turnover. I believe that happened last year. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because I think it's one of those situations where like you don't know how a guy's going to perform under those situations really until the live bullets are flying. Like you can try to simulate that in practice or on a spring showcase with creating a pressure pack situation, but I just like there's nothing like the actual moment when it arrives and you have to, because you see it all the time. You see guys miss. You've seen guys miss. What was it in the Big Ten championship game? You watch miss a makeable field goal. And like you don't know how someone's going to perform until that happens. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's going to be one of those kind of subtle kind of key developments that we'll see throughout the year of like, hey, if you find something stable at that kicker position, someone you can rely on, that'll be kind of a cause for like a sigh of relief.
I'm just thinking, like, if you're the coach, you're trying to create pressure situations for kickers. What are you going to do? Are you going to like make it? Because I saw a clip where the dude was getting, you gotta, if you miss a kick, it negatively affects your teammates. So it's something like if you every time you miss a kick, all your teammates have to run the lap. Where like they're gonna hate you if you don't make it, because that's the reality of the situation, right? I don't even know what you can do, but it's crazy. It comes down to you have Seth Turner. I think he's a senior, right? It used to be a UConn and punts and kicks, and you have the new guy. But I'm gonna pretend to I can like say his name because it's super long and complicated, but he's like I mean, as far as kickers go, he's pretty legit as a prospect, right? He was, I think, like Ohio State had offered him and some of the really big schools, but then he knew he could potentially come here and play right away, so he came in. It's hard to say. I don't know. I'm not much of a kicking expert, so even if I've seen it, I have no idea only if it goes in or not, right? At the end of the day. So we'll see. I don't think it's a position you rotate. I think that's one they'll figure out, before Indiana State comes by. And if you rotate it, it's probably a bad sign. Probably means the guy you chose is missing.
Right. Yeah. No, I think I never like when I see teams and they have like, oh, well, he's the guy that does like our short range field goals and he's the guy that does long distance, because I'm like, man, like can't get into a rhythm that way. Can't just though it always gives me a reason for pause. So yeah, if you're seeing that, it kind of takes me back to the Brom days when you would see the quarterback switching left, right. You're like, oh, come on, here we go. So yeah, hopefully that plays itself out. And yeah, honestly, like I think Jack, that was a good idea. The other teammates around him, and it's like, yo, he missed. We run it. I tell you what,
that
might not do anything to him out on the field, but get in that locker room, hey fam, you need to yell at you for a second. And you puking on the field, and it was your fault because we're running.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And like you say, the freshman who we won't really try to say his name, he's almost like Voldemort, he who shall not be named. But he does come highly regarded, but I don't know about you guys. I'm just uneasy sending out a true freshman, out there. But you know, I would love to be proven wrong, but that's just like you said, it's not really an area that you think you need until there's 3 seconds left. You're down by two, and you need to hit this one, and that'll be really interesting to kind of see how that plays out throughout the year. But I'm with you, Jack. Like I think you got to stick with one guy and ride it unless and only switch if you have to. Hopefully, we don't get there because that means something went really bad. But flip-flopping them around is never a good sign.
Right. You don't
And
want
you
to try
got to
to
think
name?
too a little bit like with the freshman coming in, you have 5 years now to play him. Like if he sits for a year or two and practices and gets used to the environment of college, all that stuff, like I'm sure that's not the worst thing. You send a true freshman kicker out there and he biffs it right, like that sometimes for kickers when it's so mental could just be like career ruining in some aspects. So
Right. Yeah, because kicking is very much so a confidence thing because it's not like you miss a kick and you get a turnaround and like the next play or the next series you get the same opportunity. They're few and far between. So yeah, if you think about that with the freshmen about how and possibly how fragile the confidence level can be. So yeah, hopefully I think ideally one of these two upperclassmen probably steps up and shows us what we need, and then you can bring Mr. Lozano in at further period.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the schedule some. And I'm not gonna ask you guys to kind of, go like win loss each game here, but it does seem like there's a schedule where there's some wins out there to be had. And I want to kind of break it down kind of month by month. Um, with starting obviously in September, and this feels like a month where you got to get at least two wins. I don't, I'm not gonna say which two. Hopefully, one of them is Indiana State. Otherwise, I don't even want to go down that road. But like, it feels like at the bare minimum in September, you got to get at least two wins. You got Indiana State at home, Wake Forest at home, and then at UCLA on the 19th, and then home against Notre Dame on the 26th. Who wins bare minimum in September, I feel like.
I would agree. I would agree. I think you have to get two. I'm with you. I'm not gonna say what two those should be. I think yeah, we can all agree that maybe that game on September 4th probably should be one. And then it's probably between those next two. That is probably number two. I have special aspirations for that Notre Dame game of just like not it going the way it went last time. So yeah, but I think two is reasonable and it's a fair ask or a fair expectation of like, all right, especially for all we've just been talking about in terms of having depth and more time and camaraderie and kind of what you're hearing from the coaching staff and not, I mean, obviously as like Jack pointed out, you hear a lot of coach speak, but it genuinely does feel like there's a greater sense of confidence about what the team can do. So when you look at that schedule, that first month, I don't think to say, hey, you got to get like we need to win two this month. I don't think that's asking for too much.
definitely not. I mean, and especially when you look at like recently ESPN put out their like SP plus, which is their, giant ranking of every school FBS and FCS. And like just by that ranking alone, the that month is our easiest stretch in the entire year, right? Indiana State's a bad FCS team. And then you have Wake Forest and UCLA. Wake Forest is at 57th in the nation. UCLA is at 46th. Now, Purdue's at 78 currently. So I'm not trying to say that means we should instantly win those games, but that is the easiest 3 game stretch Purdue's going to have the entire year. They don't have back-to-back games of teams outside of the top 40 even. Like it alternates. Even if you have a lower ranked team, like we play Maryland is 48th, right? But then before that, we play Penn State. After that, we play Iowa. We play Wisconsin, who's 53rd. Before that, you play Iowa. After that, you play Indiana, right? So all your other winnable games are surrounded by really tough games. This is the one time in the season where you have a chance to like put together a stretch and actually win a couple games in a row, potentially. And so I think it is one of those things where that Wake Forest game, as much as like UCLA matters a lot too, like I think if you want to have any insane aspirations that are way above, what we actually expect, like going 3-0 in this month is like the only way you have a chance to make a bowl. And I think they're two winnable games, but they're 50-50 games, so ideally you get one. But if you can find a way to get both, that means a lot for your season going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, you give yourself a buffer. That's my thing. Is that you give
Yeah.
yourself a buffer, and because the pressure only mounts. Like if they mess around and for whatever reason they somehow go 1-3, it's bleak kind of the rest of the way, because then you start to ask yourself, because I'm a big believer too that the winning breeds more confidence. So if you're able to, you start out 1-0, 2-0, and you like you're feeling good about yourself, and there's going to be guys from last year like, yeah, we did the same thing last year, but like, we got to continue to put our foot on the gas here. And if you're able to then go and steal one UCLA, I just feel like winning has the basically like mentally it can change in terms of like, guys, like we have a shot every week,
Momentum.
every week.
And
So
I think, on the
And
same way,
guys,
it's the
just
opposite of that. Like a lot of seasons, our schedule's set up the same way, right? It's like easy game, and then, a non-conference P5 opponent, and then Notre Dame. And I feel like every year it's like the Notre Dame being that third game there is such a killer. Because if we go and we beat Indiana State, then we lose to Wake Forest, lose to UCLA, and then you get, you know, punch in the jaw by Notre Dame and it's awful. Like once again, all the wind is out of your sails, right? I think this early stretch, just from momentum and like belief and like how the locker room handles it, is so huge. I think you're able to know a lot about where the season's probably going to go by the time that UCLA game is done.
I agree.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I feel like after that UCLA game, we're kind of gonna know a lot about this team, and just kind of how they respond. But I can't not just kind of look ahead and just think like, what if this team is 3-0 heading into that Notre Dame week? You got a top 10 opponent at
Be fun
Ross-Ade,
to think about.
maybe a night game. That that will
You will
be
be insufferable that week. I know that. I know you.
that spoiler alert, if that happens, I'm picking us to upset Notre Dame, just saying. um Looking ahead to kind of the month of October, though, it's a very interesting month because there's a lot of teams that you don't really know a lot about. And obviously no game is easy when you've won 3 games in the past 2 years, but there's winnable games in the month of October. They start on the 3rd, they go at Illinois, and then they return home to play Minnesota and Washington, and then they wrap it up Halloween in Happy Valley. Those 2 home games, man, like those are games that you can win. And I know um a lot of people right now are pretty high on Washington, but Minnesota at home, um, you know, there's a chance to get 2 games there too. Um, you know, I think 2-2 in the month of October isn't crazy.
I don't think it's crazy, but this is where like that point the point I made earlier about winning, this is where I think it matters, because if you somehow go you let's just say you win those first 3, I think that then you can look at that Illinois game and be like, okay, you might not, like you could probably take that one. And then we were talking, you talk about like you're probably gonna have to steal a game or two that someone does that people don't think you can take. Might be finally time to beat Minnesota again, and then that's where
Please.
if you're able to, like, if you beat Illinois and then you mess around, you beat Minnesota. Well, yeah, Washington might be good, but also it's like, hey, like it'll be a game in West Lafayette, so it's kind of like, hey, now you're playing with some momentum, you're playing with some confidence, and that's when you have a team that comes out and plays inspired, also confident, and that's where, okay, now you can really start to, you're playing kind of a house money almost. So yeah, I mean, I think two is doable. I'm not too sure about Penn State. Obviously, like have them having the coaching change, but I still expect them to be pretty good. And especially, I think I would look more at that Penn State game of like, yeah, you could probably you can take that, like that one as a, I would, I guess, better odds of maybe winning it. Not to say that it's like, oh, it's a gimme, but like I think I'd feel better about it if it was in West Lafayette. But obviously, can't have all home games. But I do feel like two that month, 2 in October isn't crazy. I just think that's where if you won that UCLA game, and based on how the eye test goes, I would argue against Notre Dame. That might tell you how's October going to go. Because especially if they're competitive against Notre Dame, if it's not like some like we don't get stomped, you're like, hey, look, take that effort, and against some of these other teams, that's probably good enough to win. So yeah, I think 2 there. So now we're at 4.
You know, I'm not trying to
You
add
see
on
where
to
I'm going?
Right, I
the
know.
the homer
You see where
aspect of
I'm
it here,
going here,
but like people forget last year that, despite the fact Purdue was a 2-10 team, they were not all that great, right? But they lost single score games to Michigan, who was 9-4, and to
Mhm.
Minnesota, who was 8-5. And by all accounts, really, I think Barry Odom outcoached PJ Fleck in that Minnesota game like
Big
crazy.
time.
Our team just couldn't like finish drives, and we also threw a pick six at like in the very end that literally was a soul crusher and killed us,
Yeah,
right? Like,
well, and
it,
on a trick play, you threw a
yeah,
pick in
same
the end
thing,
zone.
right?
So
Just
like, yeah,
couldn't.
you beat yourselves.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of people who just see the record and think about that. But I think there's a lot of aspects of what Purdue had last year in terms of like the bones when it came to schemes and coaching, that can carry over. And if you're just a little bit better, right? A
Right,
few less turnovers, a
right,
few more times you're actually converting field goals into touchdowns. And I'm not talking a lot, I'm talking a handful over the course of a season. And
right.
there could be several outcomes that are different. I mean, I think Rutgers was not a good team, but they're 5-7. For Purdue to be 5-7, that'd be an amazing year, right? Right now. And they were, once again, just a couple plays away from beating them and really probably beating them by a good amount. And I think so there's a good amount of things you can kind of look towards there where those games like a Minnesota, a game like a Illinois, that you can talk yourself into it. I'm not saying anything's guaranteed, obviously, but like they aren't, it's not like you're playing Ohio State, or it's not like you're playing, I'm not going to say any other schools, actually, they're playing Oregon, or something like that. They're games that you have a percent chance to win, even if it's not 100%, or like, maybe not even 50%, but like a 40% chance to win, you can still win a decent amount of times.
Yeah. What was the game last year before the Minnesota game?
You're putting this.
Because I had this belief of like last year that if they had won the Minnesota game, and then, or maybe it was, if they had won the
Well,
Minnesota.
It was
you're
Illinois
talking about the
before that.
Northwestern game too.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, but that's where I was headed to. Is I felt
Yeah.
like if you won the Minnesota game, that the Northwestern game probably doesn't go the way that it goes. And then I also think, like, I think that Purdue last year actually could have won 5 games. And I think the Minnesota game, I
Oh,
think, I think Minnesota, I think for sure, I think Rutgers, and I genuinely think again the momentum you get from winning. I genuinely think they
oh
for
yeah.
sure will get shut out against Northwestern. And I wasn't like, I think you played a good enough game, I think defensively against Northwestern, to where if you could have got some offensive production, but I think the offense was starting to get into like a real rut.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which
that
that's the
like, yeah,
game Ryan Brown got hurt in too.
mhm,
That was like the big change in the offense. I mean,
yeah,
you talk about the game before that, Illinois, Purdue scored 27 points, but they let Luke Altmaier throw for 390
he put on NFL tape.
again, like, and it's one of those things where if you could, guard the pass a little better, that might have been a different ball game. And so you just kind of hope that there's, incremental improvements across the board, that, maybe not let a guy go off for almost 400 yards passing. And then, who knows what happens.
Well, we got 6 to 8 guys on the front line who can get the job
Yeah,
done.
you get to him. We'll take care of that.
We'll be all right.
I don't think you're allowed to have that many on the field at one time, but we'll get that later.
Hey, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So
All right.
but yeah,
So now let's look. Now let's look at the last month of the year, because you have you started off with Maryland at home for homecoming. Then you go to Iowa City. Then you get the Badgers at home for the last home game of the year, and then you wrap up the year in Bloomington. That is a tougher stretch, but those first two probably your two most winnable games that month. Um, Only because it just seems like no matter what we do, we just struggle against Wisconsin. Um, but I mean, I feel like there's an opportunity there for two games also. Um, Obviously this is August, and to your guys' point about, what can happen as the year goes on, but looking at it now, like there's two winnable games in November also. I feel like it's not crazy to say.
I'll
yeah.
tell you
No,
right now.
go ahead.
Okay. Maryland, November, if you don't win that, hey, throw away the book. There are the classics: start hot and be done. I looked it up here. In the last 10 years, Purdue has won more games than Maryland in November. Okay. So I mean, come on now. They are so cursed that if we don't win that, I don't know what's going on. All right. So there's one for free. Then you just got to hope you beat Wisconsin, Iowa, Penn State. I mean, and that's, or not Penn State. Penn State's not in there, but Iowa, Wisconsin. And I don't feel great about either of those, but I also don't feel like they're untouchable.
Yeah.
You know, I give that like a 10 to 20% chance, you know, maybe if you're given the numbers. How do you feel, Sam?
Yeah, no, I agree. Also, it's at JT Boiler on Twitter, right? So in case this goes a certain kind of way, people know how to find you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. JT underscore Boiler, actually. I thank you very much.
No, I agree, man. I think I didn't know the stat, but I felt that way about Maryland. Like I always feel like they start off really high. Like they'll start off like 4-1, you know,
Which,
five.
Real quick, the stat itself is they've won 13 games in November. We've won 14, so it's pretty neck and neck.
And you think about the last 3 years.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
I was like, you think about the last 2-3 years, we haven't even sniffed a win in November. But yeah, I think that Maryland game that one is one you can and probably should. You probably should win, especially if you're like Ben Roberts and you have aspirations of going to a bowl game. You probably have to get that one. Yeah, the Iowa game and the Wisconsin game, like I agree with you. I don't see them necessarily as like, oh, you're for sure gonna lose them. I don't see them as like, you know, for sure one way or the other. I do feel like they're games that if you play up to your standard, you'll be in both of them in the fourth, and then it just comes down to can you execute, and then we'll see, just kind of like we were talking about, you know, when we were talking about the games in October. Unlike last year, were you able to finish games? Are you guys able to, you know, to get the stops? Are you able to get them to make the drives? Can your kicker make a field goal if you need it? I think it'll be kind of some of those intangible things that'll decide whether or not you're able to get that. But I would agree that there's a path for 2 wins in November, which is
I'm just saying, you can get talked into it. It's not hard. It's
This is
not
a
hard.
1,000,000% a Purdue podcast right now.
What do you say?
This is a Purdue podcast right now. Talking yourself into 6 Purdue football wins.
It is, man.
In August. Well, hey, I'll check back in on you fellas in September, all right, and see how we're feeling.
No, believe me, we're gonna bring you back.
No, I actually have a good amount of faith for this year, but it's just it's ironic, you know. I'm just
But I will say this. I do feel like there is. I think you mentioned earlier, Jack. Like there's a way here that if Purdue were to win, I'd say 4 or 5 games, it's still a positive. It's still like a net positive for the year. I think I think a lot of it will be kind of what it looks like, you know, what the eye test shows you. Because it could be something where, hey, you get a bad break here and there, and you know you lose a few games that you could have won. I don't know if this Purdue team wants to be the one who addresses some of these Wisconsin demons, like that'd be lit. If they also want to tap into like going into Iowa City and winning, again, that's great as well. But yeah, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, well, you know, we're being homers by like seeing a way for Purdue to make a bowl game. I genuinely think that you can. I think you can, because also you got to think, when you look at that schedule, you got to see some of the brand names that aren't on the schedule, and you're like, all right, well, like shit. Off of that alone, I think it boosts your chances of being able to get to that 6-win target. But yeah, for me, I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, Purdue's going to win 6 games this year. I'm going to say that I won't be.
But that's the ceiling,
right?
Like
exactly,
that's a reasonable ceiling,
right? I think
is how you can kind of word it.
Yeah, I think it's a very reasonable ceiling, and I don't feel like we would sit here in November and be completely stunned if they did in fact win 6 games. Also, you do need to get that 6th win no later than the 21st. I think we're all
yeah, that's for sure. Now, I will say too, though, to talk about, you said, you know, even if you fall short, you know, if it's a 4 or 5 win, that's what you can build on. Especially like the group of juniors Purdue has right now is actually really good. Charles Correa is a junior, Ryan Brown is a junior, and then you have all of your running backs are underclassmen, are going to be able to play again next year. George Burns, a junior. On defense, Hidori Hines is a junior. Like, you have a bunch of guys who could come back and build off of a little bit of success and take that to the next level again, potentially. And so that's where, like, you know, the way I think Barry Odom has structured this roster is in a way that is going to kind of build on continuity and hopefully build on those successes as well as things
Yeah,
go
well,
on.
and that was it. Even Kylan Fox, I believe he's a junior too, isn't he?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like I
something
think that
big.
was something that they talked about. Because I think it was Odom and then Babinski had a presser like I think it was in like December, like January,
Yeah,
maybe January or February, and they talked about how one thing they tried to do when they were in the portal was getting guys who had like multiple years of eligibility left. So that way it wasn't just kind of a one and done, so they could build off that. So yeah, again, kind of going back to that point of like if this team's able to get, if they win 4, maybe 5 games, and they, yeah, we'll all be shitty, and we'll probably look at, oh well, what's the game that that cost us? I know Ben probably gonna do a special on his own about it. But it's not gonna be all doom and gloom because the bigger picture is like, hey, that's progress in the greater scheme of things. And then you have even more returning talent. You'd like to think, okay, yeah, we you again, you can go out in the portal, you can try to find some more guys, and obviously from the younger guys you have, your class, guys developing, getting better, and it just kind of sets you up for that next year where then you can, I think, depending on how the schedule is, you can then really have proper expectations. Like, no, you guys at least we gotta get a 13th game. We gotta get you gotta get that additional bowl game. So I know I speak that way, and Jack, I think you're probably in agreement, but
definitely.
Ben's like 6 or bust.
No, no, I'm just saying it's there. There's a path there.
There
And
is, and it's not insane.
um it's not insane.
You're not insane.
Right. Yo, Ben, what are
I'm
those?
probably driving the bus that is on that path, but
Let's say
um
what are those FanDuel odds that you what are those FanDuel odds 6+ wins in?
well, all right. Well, I won't ask you guys, to say like pick pick a win-loss record or anything like that, but I wouldn't be me if I didn't like throw something out there. So, what is kind of one like hot take or one kind of out there prediction that you want to make with this team? And I'll let you guys kind of let that marinate a little bit. I'm gonna say for me that Purdue, and I'm trying to see how to word this, they're gonna have the biggest win improvement in the nation from last year. Now part of that is because they only won 2 games last year, so
Yeah.
you can't. It's not hard to kind of step that up. But kind of to go along with that, they if they can get to a bowl game, you're talking about a 4 game improvement.
Plus the bowl game could be 5.
Right. Right.
So that's mine. Um, I will wear that one. I'm sure everybody will let me have it when that doesn't happen come December there, but that's mine. So you guys, I kind of put you on the spot a little bit there. I don't know who wants to go first, but
Got
good
one. I
luck
think
trying to top that one.
this transfer portal season, everyone's wondering why Purdue didn't get a quarterback. I think by the time we hit like January or portal season next year, everybody's gonna be hoping that Purdue retains their quarterback because Ryan Brown's on the last year of his rev share contracts. That's what my hot take is that before everybody's hoping he would leave and we get someone new. By the time we are back in the transfer portal, everybody's hoping we can actually retain him and pay him like we should.
Like it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I like that. Oh my God, I kind of want to say. I mean,
Do it. Go for it.
I want to say that. I want to say Purdue's going to beat a ranked team this year.
Okay.
Like Penn,
Yeah.
because Penn State's ranked.
Yeah. Iowa.
Iowa's ranked. Something tells me that if Wisconsin starts to figure their stuff out, there's a possibility they could be ranked by the time we see them. And then is Illinois ranked?
I don't think so. I think they're right outside of the top 25.
But yeah, I think or it could be Washington. But yeah, I think Purdue's getting a ranked team this year. They're gonna get somebody. And look, if they do it in West Lafayette, I'm on the field. So love it for me.
Yeah. So Notre Dame, Washington, Penn State, and Indiana are all ranked right now. And Iowa.
Notre Dame, okay, so Notre Dame, Washington, Penn State, Iowa, and IU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got what, 2
You
at
got a lot of
home, 3
chances.
on the road?
Yeah, I was saying, yeah, exactly. Like they'll have chances. They'll have chances. So yeah,
And
but
that Washington game, I believe, is a night game
Friday night.
Friday
It's
night
a Friday
too.
night
Yeah,
game.
So
Yeah,
that'll
it's
be
a
a
Friday
great
night
game.
game in
I
West
think
Lafayette. Yeah, it is. It's the one I look at, and I'm kind of like, man. Again, I think that UCLA game tell you a lot about what the quality of that team is. I really do. But I think that that's the game for me where I look at and I'm like, you want to talk about catching a team on their back foot because Washington will have to fly across the country. You're playing a day earlier. Like there's a recipe there for that one to happen. But yeah, I'm just gonna say that. I just think I think they'll be the ranked team this year. That's as
Okay,
far as I'll go.
I'm down.
okay, I
I
like it.
wanted Ben to say something wild like Purdue's gonna be in the Big Ten championship game. I'm like, yeah.
No, nah, I won't go that far, but let some things happen come, these first few games, and that might be a different story. But
They beat UCLA. So
no, I think I think we're all in agreement that there's reasons for optimism with this squad. And whether it's the schedule, whether it's the depth, whether it's guys you brought back. They had one of the best transfer portal classes in the nation. So, not only is there depth, but it's good depth, which is a thing we haven't really had. So, there's reasons for optimism, and we'll see what happens.
yeah. I also hope I think this is kind of like I don't know if it's like a weird thing to say, but I hope that we're not like ravaged by the injury bug this year too. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's one like that'll go. I think that'll go a long way. I mean, it's football, so like the attrition is always it's always a thing. So like you're going to have some injuries, you're going to have some stuff that happens, but we've been talking about the depth at various points, and it's like, man, depth gets eaten up real quick. If you have a couple games where you lose several bodies, so it would. I mean, if we can have a relatively healthy, and I think especially like if we're just like if you can kind of go through October and be
Yeah,
relatively like okay,
we can have
that's
a
where I
lot of
think
those
you can
winnable games.
right you turn into November, and again we were talking about how like the start is so important, but I think injury wise if you can stay relatively okay, maybe some guys getting some nicks and bruises, miss a game, game 2 games, something like that, you can roll into November, and the task could be just hey you just got to get one. Um, it could be that way. So yeah, I hope that I hope that Purdue's fortunate in that department because yeah, I want to say we just double our win total
Also,
again.
it'd just be a lot more fun to talk about some wins.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because how
it'll be a
many
lot easier to care.
man,
I
man, what
think
we
we need
talked
it.
about? We talked about 3 wins over what 2 years.
Yeah, we
Rough
need
time.
it.
Rough time.
But we'll see what happens, boys. Football is just around the corner again. Almost 2 weeks away
Yeah,
from
days, man. We did it.
opening
We made
night at Ross 8. So hopefully this was a good kind of introduction to that, and none of our predictions will make us look silly or anything like that. But really enjoyed this one, Jack. Again, just kind of remind everybody where they can follow you on social media there.
Yeah, so pretty much JT Boiler anywhere you look. Uh, Mostly on Twitter though most of the time. So if you want to check me out there, that'd be cool. Talk a lot of Purdue football, especially when it comes time for portal and recruiting and stuff like that. I try to stay in the know. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely head on by. I appreciate you guys having me. It's always a blast. I love chatting it up with you guys. It's always a good conversation, good perspectives, and a lot of fun. So I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, it was a pleasure to have you on, and yeah, we might have to get you on after September, and we can all
Check back in.
recalibrate
Yeah.
the expectations.
So we can yeah. Hopefully we'll all be happy.
Yeah,
That'd be amazing.
honestly,
Hopefully,
yeah,
hopefully it'll be after a 3-win September.
Yeah,
right.
that'd
Uh,
be. I would love to come back on in that case. I would.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll in fact, yeah, that happens. We'll yeah, you gotta come back on. You gotta come back on.
Deal.
So,
Deal.
good stuff.
All right. Well, appreciate it again. Thank you everybody for all their continued interaction and support. Most importantly, boiler up.
Yes, sir.